Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Cerns from Haley Marketing, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley event. So today, I'm excited to, I was going to say help prevent, but I'm going to say listen to the recap of this year's Staffing World Conference. For those of you who attended Staffing World, you know it was kind of an amazing event. Unfortunately, thanks to the world we're in, Staffing World had to go virtual this year, and when ASA made the very hard decision to cancel things in Nashville, we were all disappointed, but I really have to give kudos to everybody at the American Staffing Association for just an amazing job in an incredibly short time frame to come up with a virtual platform. It was a lot like stepping into a video game. It was very immersive. Speaking content, from what I heard, was fantastic, and I'm excited to hear a lot more. And very unique. Haven't seen anything like it in the industry. So I really am looking forward to seeing everybody face to face in Denver next year. But I want to thank everybody at ASA for what they did to make Staffing World 2020 a success. Today, I'm going to turn it over in just a minute to the rest of our team, who's going to share what we took home from listening to the session. So Matt, Rob, Mandy, Aaron, Kathy, and Megezi are going to walk through highlights of many of the sessions that our team was able to listen to. These are going to be our quick recaps, and I will forewarn you, usually we like to have pretty slides that are more pictures than copy, but in this particular case, we think it makes sense to just summarize a lot of the bullets. So we've tried to do that to bring a few key points out of the sessions we attended so that you can have some good take-home value and get ready to attend next year's Staffing World. With that said, let me turn it over. We'll get off of my introduction. Oh, I guess I'm not quite done with my introduction. If you want to join us in the conversation, please, reach out on Twitter. We do monitor that during Lunch with Haley events. Just use the hashtag Lunch with Haley to chat with our digital team. All right, let's turn it over. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Megezi is up first, talking about the super sessions.
Thank you so much, David. Well, starting off, one of the super sessions was presented by a future of work strategist by the name of Heather McGowan. And she pretty much was just highlighting future trends that she saw were coming down the pipeline that our industry could really take advantage of and really need to be in the know of. The first thing, which I believe all of us are pretty much aware of and appreciate, is that work, the concept of work, has to be reimagined. What she emphasized is that work now needs to also encompass learning as well as leadership skills. How she defined learning nowadays needs to encompass rapid learning. We need to be very cognizant of the skills that we need and pursue them with a vengeance. That involves also unlearning skills that are no longer beneficial to us. We need to upskill, and what she meant by that is looking into ways to improve the skills that we currently have and reskilling, pretty much almost a cross-disciplinarship type of learning. So look at skills that are adjacent to what you currently have under your belt and learn those as well to expand your repertoire. Human skills are now taking a higher priority. The world as we know it, as we're getting more entwined and immersed in technology, there's much more comfort level with technical skills, or there's a broader breadth of people who have technical skills. So human skills are now becoming more valuable in the market. She also recapped a PricewaterhouseCoopers survey that's sent out every year to top CEOs, asking them what do they see as possible disruptions to their business. Typically at the top of the list is terrorism, recession. She anticipates, which I think we can all appreciate, that a pandemic will probably be in the next survey results. But one of the big concerns that they have is talent and the shortage of talent. Now, some of the items that she anticipated being here just for good are telepresence, trust being a huge factor in business, with us not being able to interact one-on-one in person as frequently as we did before. We all need to build trust more into our virtual interactions. And then transparency, because I cannot see you and interact with you, and especially internally within a corporation, there needs to be more transparency so that we can continue to trust and work with each other on a human-to-human level. And so that is what Heather had for us during this session. So I'll turn this over to Matt to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Magazi. The second super session and keynote came from Eric Qualman, who's an author, motivational speaker, and I felt he had some awesome takeaways from his talk about digital transformation, designing your future. And my first takeaway here really is appropriately timed with a lot of companies setting annual goals for 2021, where it's very easy to get caught up in the big picture, and that helps us with planning now. But then how are you going to reach those annual goals? What are you going to really focus on throughout the process? At Haley Marketing, we have annual goals and 3-year goals, but then we also break them down into quarterly goals, and also, weekly assignments as well, some weekly tasks. So Eric's point was, you have those long-term goals, but how do you stay in that process so you don't just get caught up focusing on that long-term goal? What are your smaller steps to help you reach those goals? And the second one, really having a lot of appreciation and love for technology. One of my big themes from Staffing World 2020 was really summed up well by Eric with, you want to be 1 year ahead of your competition, but you can only be 1 year ahead of your audience. So it's great that you want to beat your competition with the latest technology or process change or automation, but if your audience isn't ready for it, they're not going to accept it and you're going to be stuck. So you could be ahead of your competition, but no one wants to work with you. No one wants your product or service. So that was a really great takeaway to remember that with technology, how it's important to beat your competition, but your audience has to be ready for all of those changes. The third keynote, I'm going to pass it back over to Magazi.
Thank you, Matt. Now with this keynote, the topic was tough lessons learned, diversity, inclusion, staffing, and success. And it was presented by Mark Morial, who is the president of the National Urban League and former mayor of New Orleans back in 1994 to 2002. Now, his approach to encouraging and building diversity, inclusion, staffing within staffing is to look at it as any other organizational transformation initiative. You want to not treat it as something special with its own unique parameters, but treat it as you would any other business initiative. You want to look and see if there's an expert that you can hire to help organize it, help put a plan in place, even to help you figure out as an organization where you are in regards to how your industry is in regards to this initiative. Where are you on this spectrum? Are you very inclusive and diverse? Are you not inclusive enough and need to really work on it? So hiring an expert can help you pinpoint where you are and where you need to put the most effort. Now, in regards to treating this as any other transformation initiative, you want to always assign someone who will be responsible for the initiative. They should work with your team, and that team includes all of the leadership team members as well as all of the employees in creating a plan and reviewing the plan and making sure everyone is on board with it. You also need to get together, develop metrics, understand how the project is progressing. Is it on pace? And are you going to be successful with it, or are there areas that you need to put a little more time and attention to? That goes right into the next one. Put resources behind the effort as much as appropriate. Measure the results, and at the end of the day, make sure there's accountability built in. If there's no accountability, the initiative can be successful at the beginning, but then it just it pretty much just becomes a short-term success and doesn't have any longevity to it. So you need accountability to make sure it continues to pay off dividends. And so that's what Mark had to present to us. And the next presentation, impactful leadership.
Thanks, Magazi. The last keynote presentation came from Carla Harris, where she talked about impactful leadership, currency change, and creating a powerful presence. And her keynote was awesome. I mean, we could have 5 or 10 slides on all of the amazing content she shared. It's really hard just to summarize on this on one. But for me, what stuck out from Carla's talk was, the first thing was talking about how when you're a leader in an organization, creating other leaders is really important, which, you know, that part I really had thought of before, but this next point really struck a chord with me, was that amplifies your impact on the organization. If you're a leader in a company and you're able to develop leadership skills in other members of your company, your influence is going to start to spread throughout the company as you teach them to be successful leaders. And building off of that, she talked about working with leadership and a CEO to really just focus on the things only they can do. It came from a conversation she had with a CEO previously in her career, where, you know, the CEO said, if something's on the list that someone else can, if something's on their list that someone else can handle, it shouldn't be on their list, right? The CEO should really only focus on those major impactful tasks, or even, you know, bigger picture items that only they can handle. So when we're working with leadership, really take a step back and think about if they need to be aware or working on it, or can you handle it? The last point I took from Carla's presentation was about innovation and creating a culture of innovation, telling people and celebrating it's okay to fail. And it also tied in with an article I read recently what talked about innovation, where it's okay to break a window. We don't want to burn down the house. So that's what we can learn from. What can we learn from our failures? You know, the innovation is great. That's the only way we can learn new things. You know, a pandemic and crises have been a great way to try to innovate in new ways. What can we do to learn from our failures to continue to spread that culture of innovation throughout our company? That'll wrap up the keynote presentations from Staffing Gold 2020. So we'll jump into the breakout sessions. And first up is Kathy Lansky, our senior copywriter.
Hello. Yeah, the first session I went to was ensuring safety and health and safety when threats are all around. And the key takeaway from this is that everyone's got their own responsibility. The employer, the staffing agency, and the employees all have to take part to create a safe work environment. The employer needs to make sure that the workplace is safe for the employees that come in. The staffing agency needs to keep their employees safe, and the employees need to follow best practices to keep themselves safe. And there's no specific OSHA guidance on COVID-19 protocols, but it all falls under the safe and healthy work environment protocols, and violations are considered type 1, so it's serious. It's something you do need to take seriously. And you know, we kind of all know the protocols, the mask, social distancing, hand washing, but the other thing to emphasize is for employees to stay home if they're sick. We've kind of got a culture of really emphasizing attendance, but it might not be the best idea when you know, people come in sick and then they end up spreading it to the entire environment. And the last thing that I thought was interesting was that an unexpected consequence is that it's hard to get drug tests done on time because of capacity restraints, because of all the COVID testing that's going on. So you might need to reset expectations with employers as far as it might take a while to get people to work, or you might need to skip the drug testing on for positions that might not be critical to double check on that. But that's all I had on that, and I'm going to pass this back over to Magazi, who will be talking about resilience in the face of adversity.
Thank you, Kathy. So with this session, the emphasis was on building resiliency within you personally as an individual. And the definition they used for resiliency was increasing your capacity to recover quickly in challenging situations. And some of the key points here were that the 2 key areas you need to focus on when increasing your resiliency is your mindset and the actions you take. And 3 examples that were given were, first, self-care, put self-care up as a priority, and that includes things like sleep, exercise, nutrition, conscious breathing, laughing with friends, playing with your kids, those kinds of things that put you in a better mindset and also keep your energy reserves up. The other thing was self-awareness. Her emphasis, Kelly Irons, the presenter, her emphasis was on making sure that you realize and acknowledge that the only thing that you can really control is yourself. And in doing so, take the time to reflect on what are your personal goals. Think about how you handle yourself in difficult situations, in adversity, and are those responses beneficial or detrimental to you achieving your goals? The other point that she had made was have a funeral for perfection. And what she meant by that is give yourself the permission not to be perfect in everything. You're not going to always show up and knock everything out of the park, and make sure that you give yourself permission not to always be at 100% every single time you face a challenging situation. When she left off the session, with this point to keep in mind is that you really need to adapt now before you're forced to adapt. The situation is changing very quickly, even under the COVID situation when things were very hot. It was a very dynamic situation, and even now that is still going to be the case. So adapt now before you're forced to adapt. Her expectation is that the recovery is going to be big and fast, and the earlier you start preparing for that, the better you will be positioned later on. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy to talk about the next session, skill building in the era of remote work.
Thanks, Magazi. This was a great presentation on the skills that staffing sales professionals need to build during this era of remote work. And the session, as all the other sessions, was jam-packed with information. But the point that hit home with me was how Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, which you can see right there, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives, it's the most adaptable, and how this applies to the staffing industry right now. So the balance of her presentation focused on what she referred to as digital Darwinism, and how staffing firms must adapt their sales strategy to grow in a profitable direction. And on this slide, you can see two of my favorite takeaways from the presentation. The first one is it's time to move beyond generic messages and sales calls and get specific about value. Things like I'm here to help, or I'm just checking in on you, or we're here for you. Those types of messages now are falling flat, and you really need to get more specific, saying something like, if you're furloughing employees, I can help you implement a cost-effective strategy to ensure you have a productive, flexible workforce moving forward. Something more that's value-oriented and gets specific about what you can do for an employer. And whether you're writing a sales email or leaving a voicemail, or if you're writing the call to action for a blog post, whatever you're doing, make sure that you detail the value you can deliver for employers in this economy. And then the presenter also shared a 3-step process to secure appointments over the phone, since many of us are forced to sell remotely right now and can't do those drop-in visits. And the 3 steps are disarming, providing a purpose, and asking questions. The disarming is about connecting on a personal level to lower sales resistance, things like acknowledging that you're interrupting someone's day. And then the purpose step is getting to the point quickly, acknowledging that people are busy and their time is valuable, and explaining exactly why you are calling. And then the 3rd step is asking the right questions. These are open-ended questions, and they're designed to explore challenges and home in on employers' pain points. And obviously, that requires that you do your homework in advance, and you understand the potential challenges that this employer might be facing. And once you do these 3 things, an employer will be much more receptive to providing you a time to date, for a follow-up appointment to talk about working together. So kind of setting the stage for that working relationship. And there was a lot more in the presentation, like I said, as with all the other presentations, but those are my biggest takeaways. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, who will talk about creating a Gen Z candidate pipeline.
Thank you, Mandy. This presentation. It was interesting because a lot of the talk at past staffing conferences have been about millennials, and now as Generation Z will be 1/5 of the workforce starting in 2021, the conversation's starting to change here. So Liz Wessel, the founder and CEO of WayUp, really dug into a lot of different stats and takeaways on how to connect with Generation Z. And the first point here really focuses on, that's a really high percentage, nearly 80% of Gen Z workers want to identify and work with a company that's committed to diversity. They'll look for another job if your company isn't committed to diversity. And building off of that, the social conscious approach, they want to identify with a company, they have positive opinions of companies in that social conscious realm, nearly 90%. So Generation Z really wants to work for companies that identify with them with their diversity and social conscious, emphasis. And the last part really talks about work-life balance. And what was interesting in the presentation was they talked about 3 or 4 different ways on what defines that work-life balance. It wasn't a flexible schedule. It was, the highest response was 38% of Gen Z respondents were loving what you work, loving where you work or what you do. And that was really enlightening on top of that professional personal balance, right? It wasn't just, hey, I want to have a flexible schedule. There were some really good takeaways on identifying and connecting with that company. So those 3 points really work well together. The second point here talks about the experience that they want. And the speaker talks about, that high touch, high tech experience. And an example was the Uber experience of if you apply for a job, it's an easy application process on a computer or a mobile device. You instantly hear back if you're qualified for the job, and you can schedule that interview right away. It's almost like the Amazon too as well, right? We removed a lot of friction. It's instant feedback, and it's simple. It's high touch, it's high tech, and it works very well together in meeting those candidates, those Gen Z candidates, where they're spending time and making it easy for them to work for your company. The next slide talks about, that diversity inclusion pipeline. And the speaker talked about a company that wanted to have 20% diversity hires. And they walk through each step of the process, right? From the applications to the initial resume review, all the multiple steps were around 20%. But when they got to an assessment, it was a HackerRank assessment, it dropped to 7%. And it showed them that there could be some, bias or something in that part of their multi-step approach in the hiring that was really hurting them from reaching their goal. So how would they have to adjust to reach that diversity inclusion goal they have in their multi-step hiring process? And the last way they talked about, diversity inclusion, and I'll get into more of this with a later presentation, was some common hiring mistakes. If you have GPA requirements, maybe there are people in college who couldn't dedicate fully to their grades. They had to work part-time job or multiple part-time jobs to make their way through college, or job descriptions with gender tones or other verbiage that could make someone resistant to working for you. They were really interesting things to take a step back and analyze to see if they're really necessary for those job openings you're trying to fill. Next, we'll have Aaron Eslek talk about coaching for performance and how to unlock leadership potential.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. This was a really interesting session. They actually had a panel, and you can see the panel off to the right there, of 5 individuals who are business coaches, who are leadership coaches, who go into these companies, some of them Fortune 500, some of them Fortune 50, and really focus on developing not only the top level leadership of those organizations, but how they can unlock the performance and the leadership potential of folks that are already within the organization to move them up and to create that leadership pipeline. So you notice the word coaching is there, and one of the concepts that was brought up is that coaching, when you first think about coaching, you think about maybe a football coach or something on the field telling the players what to do, but in reality, coaching is actually operating in a way that unlocks potential that's already within that individual so that they can perform at the next level. There were some really interesting insights that came out of this discussion. I think these are 3, but there was a whole lot. When the panel was surveyed, they all agreed that most companies are developing their current leaders. So this is the C-suite might be hiring managers or something like that, but they're not developing on a large scale. They're not developing new leaders. And one of the reasons why they talked about this is that when you have people move to another company or retire or simply just move to another position, there are these huge leadership gaps within these organizations that when these consultants come in, they say, okay, first you need to fill these leadership gaps because you can't have those gaps to then develop the next layer. Another key insight that I took away from this was that they all agree that leaders need to develop new skills to meet the future or new industry challenges. Obviously with this year, we've all faced some challenges, and a lot of companies have faced challenges they've never even imagined. And so they've had to develop new skills themselves, but then thinking to the next level and saying, okay, how can I translate these skills that I've learned and coach folks within my organization to also understand and really apply these skills? One of these things, one of these other insights that was really interesting is that one of the panelists actually does surveys within the organizations that they go into, and overwhelmingly, these organizations come away with stats somewhere close to 90% of their senior leaders in those organizations, C-suite especially, come away with high emotional intelligence, being able to deal with these problems in a very level-headed way, and be able to meet challenges in a way that doesn't create friction within their team, doesn't create extra problems because they know how to handle the stress of those situations. And that really stood out to me. The next part of this, I thought this was interesting, and I was kind of taking some of these items personally and trying to figure out how I can work these into my own life. But they all agree that future leaders, the leaders of tomorrow, are going to need, not just have now, but are going to need a healthy dose of self-regard. Now, this is not necessarily pride or a hefty attitude toward the rest of their organization, but they're going to have to be confident in themselves and their skills. And what Matt said earlier about leadership is that, if I know I'm very good at something, I'm going to focus on that. If there's something that is on my task list to do, but I'm not very good at it, that's something I should be delegating. That's something I should be unlocking performance in somebody else and influencing them to operate, because I need to be better at what I'm doing. Flexibility ended up being one of those characteristics that this panel really agreed on, that, as a leader, you can't be rigid. If you're rigid, you're going to take your organization down, not up. Obviously, with emotional intelligence, having great problem-solving skills is a core component of that. They all agreed that that was essential for leaders of the near future and later on. And there's one characteristic that stood out to me, and that was empathy. Being able to understand, not on a nitty-gritty level, but understand on a really gut level what your team is going through. Your equals, but also the people that are technically beneath you in the kind of the food chain of the organization, so that you can lead everybody forward, not just one group, but unlock the potential of your entire team. If you go to the next screen here, there's just a couple more items. So I left this panel just with some ideas here. I love takeaways. So what works? This question was posed to this group that said that ongoing leadership development is key. You can't just give leadership development to your C-suite one time and expect that they're going to perform at a higher level. You need to provide ongoing leadership development. And the higher you are in leadership, the more you need to be leading by example. We all agree that leading by example is the number one way to transfer knowledge, to transfer culture within your organization. And they also agree that trying to do this in one way, trying to train your team in one way doesn't work. It's not effective. But if you find multiple ways of training your team and getting your team on board, it might be a classroom setting, it might be experiential, it might be one-to-one coaching or training, but they all agree that multi-pronged approaches works best consistently. And then they were saying that you need to be able to measure the leadership of your team and the development of your team. So you need to establish with individuals or with your teams a process for inspecting. Let's say it like this: for inspecting what you expect. So as the leader of the organization, I expect my organization, the folks or the team within this organization, when I provide training and when I provide leadership coaching or anything like that, what do we expect to get out of this? And I thought that stood out. A couple other points, and I'll move on. One thing that stood out is in a lot of our organizations, we talk about providing mentors to folks that are entering the organization or want to develop. But this panel made they talked about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is somebody that can come along somebody and talk about the different components of their job and how to get better at it. A sponsor is somebody who can help you find a place at the table. So I thought that was interesting. And then the last quote there: how to maximize human potential. You have to put the human at the center. So this stood out to me. Actually, Magezi is going to be taking our next part here, talking about workplace culture. Go ahead, Magezi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. So as Aaron said, this presentation was really focused on improving and strengthening your internal workplace culture. And one of the key metrics to understand how your culture is doing and understanding and measuring the strength of it is to see whether the group is achieving its shared purpose consistent with the group values. And values is defined as principles that everyone has bought into, and whether they're consistently also achieving their purpose consistent with the group's beliefs. And beliefs are what the group has bought into as what is true. And so he then went into, Shane Jackson, president of Jackson Healthcare, went into some ideas and points to help you strengthen your internal culture. The first thing you need to do is define your values, the principles that you value. And an exercise that he proposed is consider your eulogy. What would you want to be included in your eulogy? How would you want people to define the way you lived your life? Those principles are what you should include in the values for the group, for the company. The other thing is document your core beliefs. Write this down, and these can be written rules and unwritten rules. When it comes to unwritten rules, involve the team and ask them, what are the expectations that we are all responsible for or called to, but may not necessarily be explicitly vocalized. The other thing is communicate above and beyond to your current and prospective team members. This is key, just specifically to do with the virtual environment that we find ourselves in. Communicate and even over communicate. And so with specific examples for remote workers, really understand that there are new norms. So as the way you treat your new remote workers should be different from how you have treated your workers in the past, and this should be reflected in your training. Every communication should be purposeful, and again, over communicate, because you can't rely on the natural caught more than taught models. People don't interact, they can't overhear their colleagues' conversations or witness how their colleagues respond to different situations and challenges. So you need to over communicate and not rely on people being able to pick up on nonverbal cues. And the last thing you had is have a real mission statement. This goes back to a previous slide that we looked at in terms of making sure that you build on trust and transparency. People will know, whether internal in team members or clients, they will know if your mission statement is inconsistent with your actions. Now, the next session was on the rise of robots, friend or foe to women in the future of work. Now, the emphasis on women in this presentation was because studies show that companies with women in the leadership team perform better. And so this session was exploring how exactly does technology present possible roadblocks for women specifically. And some of these stats that they looked at or presented, excuse me, were that 60% of jobs worldwide will likely be automated by 2030, and that means that 40 to 160 million women will need reskilling to transition due to this this disruption with the introduction of technology on the scene. We all recognize that robots and humans are very skilled at different things. Robots, data analysis, repetitive tasks, those kinds of things work best for them. With humans, agility, judging emotion, nonverbal cues, that's what humans are great at. Now, many companies are using AI to help reduce hiring bias, but the speaker had still some points that every company should keep in mind to make sure that the AI really is reducing bias and it's not instead presenting just more roadblocks. So there should be a focus on skills and values of every candidate who is being considered for a position. Don't go by generalizations. Understand that an individual person doesn't represent the whole. So if there are any idiosyncrasies with one person, doesn't mean that it should be, that idiosyncrasy should be projected and assumed to be representative of the entire group. Include the use of diverse recruitment teams, and as well understand that there is a difference between equality, equity, and justice. And as the presenter defined it, equality is assuming that everyone benefits from the same support system. Equity is just making sure that everyone is getting the support that they need. And then justice is causes of inequity are just removed and just making it possible or more likely that everyone is successful without needing support in place. Now, the next presentation is looking at my tech stack is better than yours. And so I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Megezi. This presentation, again, a common theme was adding technology to your organization. And one of the slides in the presentation showed all the different technology options out there. And there's over 100, and it's impossible to keep them all straight. So one of the big takeaways was to make sure to find the technology that helps your company accomplish your goals and solve your problems. There's a lot of options out there, but what is available that can help you solve your problems? Where can you get more time back, get more ROI from that technology? Because we still need to talk to people, but there's a lot of processes that can be automated. So what can you really find that works for, you know, your healthcare company or your light industrial, your clerical admin staffing? What can you do to help improve that, the automation part, and eliminate a lot of the manual tasks from your company? The one next, when you find that right technology, the next step is really important to implement internally, right? We need buy-in from the top down, the middle part of the company, and every different level of your company to have people be excited about this technology. But to balance that, to really improve the productivity of your team, it's a best practice to introduce it in phases and don't overpromise, right? We buy new technology and expect it to change the world tomorrow, where it's great to dip our toe in the pool and slowly and gradually roll it out to where you start to implement it in steps so people can get comfortable with it, see the results, you get more buy-in, and then fully add more and more technology to your company so they get more time back and can really spend more time on those high-touch parts of their job. Next presentation, we'll pass the microphone over to Rob.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. So this session was called No Admittance, How to Sell When You Can't Be in the Room. And really it was broken down into 4 main areas. The first is, we took a look at our mindset, you know, those of us that serve the staffing industry, those of us in the staffing industry, our mindset of the employment landscape and where we're currently at. Then it took a look at what is the client and the candidate mindset and kind of how they see things and, you know, the day-to-day that they're going through. And then how do we get their attention and then stand out to them? So really 4 key areas is where it broke down. And I'm not going to get too far into the first 2 bullet points because a lot of the takeaways that we have here are based on the 3rd and 4th points. But really you have to take the ideologies and kind of really the way that your clients and your candidates are feeling and the way that they're living today and the things that are on their plate when you come up with crafting your messaging and how you're trying to get their attention. Because staffing and hiring is a part of their job, right? And really what it comes down to is you want your message to be more human oriented, right? You want it to be he ended with saying you want to be a caring and sharing machine, have that empathy and truly become a value added just resource to your clients and the candidates that you're recruiting for. So instead of calling in with a check-in that usually ends up with, how many jobs do you have open? Truly ask them, how are you today? How are you getting through these tough times? What are some of the challenges you're seeing? What are some of the challenges you're dealing with? Be open-ended with your questioning and get them talking, because by them talking, you can then help solve and then also position yourself as that employment expert and also as another, again, value-added resource versus a transactional sale. You also want to change your conversations from being transactional to being more project-based. So instead of calling up and asking, how many job openings do you have? Or, here's the top candidate of the month, or here's our top talent for the month. You want to get into conversations that might be around upscaling or upskilling certain positions, certain departments within a company. There was a lot of talent that was not on the marketplace in the first quarter of 2020, just based on the employment landscape, that suddenly became available through the layoffs of COVID and then the furloughs of COVID, and they now are in the marketplace. So you can change the conversation and become, again, more of a resource to them. That then leads us to the next point of truly building the network of people that are out there singing your praises, building your pipeline. So you want to finish 2020 strong, but also set yourself up to have success in 2021 and beyond. So by changing those conversations and being viewed as a trusted advisor, you're going to position yourself for that next phone call, for being the person they go to when it comes to employment augmentation, et cetera. The other cool point I thought was kind of interesting was leveraging reference checks. So instead of it just being a bullet point and a checkpoint on going through the hiring process, when you call up for a reference, ask them to help you out. And by starting the conversation with getting them in a helping mood, one, you're going to take them through asking the questions that you have to ask, because you're going to be taking those stories that they're telling you and you're going to be selling your candidate. But then secondly, you can ask them, are you part of the hiring process for your organization? And maybe turn them into a possible source of a relationship for future business. Instead of probing or pitching, you obviously want to probe. This is one of the big things, is you don't want to be a walking billboard only with a self-serving agenda, constantly saying, everything that you do. You want to get them talking. You want to get them talking about themselves. By that and asking open-ended questions, and it'll help drive a more productive conversation, where then you can add where you can actually help and then get into the pitch later. And then lastly, this is one that's kind of near and dear to our heart here, especially myself here at Telemarketing, but you want to be viewed as that thought leader. And by becoming a thought leader, you have to provide content that is geared towards those folks, right? So it's not going to always be about staffing, but it could be about hiring trends. It could be about legislative updates. It could be about just best practices on anything in that employment life cycle. So the person that presented this presentation, Michael June, his thing was give, then ask. So for every 7-10 pieces or touch points, you want to be giving folks 7 to 8 pieces that are not even about you, but things that are going to resonate to them. So that was no admittance and how to sell when you cannot be in the room. I'm going to hand it back over to Matt now to talk about Tech Talks.
I will actually jump in on this one. So these Tech Talks are short presentations given by technology experts. They just express very specific staffing-specific tech challenges. And in this case, this first one was how to leverage your satisfaction survey technology. The importance of putting out surveys and proactively seeking out feedback is 86% of your clients or candidates are looking at your online reviews when making a purchasing decision, or when making a decision whether or not to work with you. And so by getting that feedback and promoting and publishing the positive reviews you're getting, you're increasing your conversion rates as well. And one tip that was highlighted, or that came to mind in terms of this session, was that 40% of those who view your business as in a positive frame of mind, they will typically leave a comment if you specifically shout out one of your team members. And so when they see a name that they recognize, they are more likely to actually respond to your survey and also publish it and further promote your business. And so for the next tech talk, I'll actually turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Magazi. This was actually the presentation I pre-recorded for Staffing World 2020, where we wanted to focus on 2 different ways to help staffing agencies use technology to make their advertising dollars, that recruitment budget, go further. And the first one is thinking about, do you have the technology in place to track applicant source at the job level? Can you tell if your applicants came from Indeed, ZipRecruiter, from Facebook, from your job board? Can you track that source down? Because then you want to analyze to determine, okay, we had this % of applicants from each source. How much did that result in actual dollars, revenue, gross margin at the end of the day? And make data-driven decisions based off of that. The second way you want to look at technology is, can you centralize and automate your reporting? Or are you logging into multiple platforms and systems to collect that data? Do you have a dashboard that can bring all that information into one area so you're not spending time, wasting time logging into your job board, into Indeed, into ZipRecruiter, into Facebook, all of these different places? If you have that source tracking available, if you have that dashboard available, that can be really helpful to use technology to help you save time and get more ROI out of your recruitment spend. I'm going to pass the microphone back over to Magazi for the next slide.
Thank you, Matt. Now, this session was looking at how to improve your internal onboarding. And this was a panel discussion, and they emphasized that you need to expand your tech stack. There's a lot of benefits and efficiencies that you can gain from using the right technology. And they listed actually a slew of technologies that they all used. One that really stood out to me was one called Phonality, where as you are training your recruiters on how to talk on the phone with potential clients and with candidates, there's a feature where the trainer where you can record the call, they can listen to the call, but also there's a whispers feature where the trainer can give instructions and prompts to the trainee, and only the trainee can actually hear what's being said. And then there's a barge feature where the trainer can barge into the call and take over. The other big point that they made was the emphasis on human interaction. You're really looking to, from the start, build team cohesiveness, emphasize and immerse them in your company culture, and those two together will, in the long term, develop loyalty and longevity with the organization. And they had a slew of examples of ways in which you can encourage this. So through virtual activities such as icebreakers or virtual water coolers, exceed their expectations. One example was sending them free lunches through DoorDash right to their door. Making sure that you are also onboarding your team the way you would onboard your candidates so they can be familiar with what the process looks like. And make sure that you are over communicating, lots of follow-up, and a lot of positive reinforcement as well. And with your conversations, making sure that they are fun and not always work-related. And the last point was just really immerse them in your company culture, showing them what the culture is and not just speak to it. And so with that, I will pass it over to Matt to speak about the expanding gig economy.
Thanks, Magazi. The presentation here was led by Art Pappas from Bullhorn, and it was a common theme again of talking about adding technology to an industry that can be adverse to change, but the industry has to change. And while you add that technology right through job posting or chatbots, scheduling interviews, texting, etc., that's there to automate those mundane, repetitive, time-consuming tasks. But how can we introduce that automation, to maintain the connection with talent and clients. So kind of connecting a couple of my slides here, that high touch, high tech experience. What can you do to bring that tech into your office to eliminate a lot of the repetitive, time-consuming tasks, but then to be able to still provide a really awesome experience, because recruiting is still a people business. You have to provide that level of service to your candidates while also giving them a really great tech experience. So that was a big takeaway here from this roundtable about expanding the gig economy and implications for staffing firms. Next up will be Kathy talking about unconscious bias.
Thanks, Matt. I was talking, this was a really good presentation by Nika White, who's has a consulting company on this topic of unconscious bias. And, a lot of us were kind of raised to just sort of let things go and, not confront bias when you're aware of it. But a lot of that's kind of the coward's way out, and we're encouraged to choose courage over comfort. And when impressive comments come out, you need to confront them in a non-aggressive way and just say, tell me more, help me to understand. And a lot of times that forces people to explain themselves, and they really can't, or it makes them get a little more introspective about why they may be making those comments or having those thoughts. And managers shouldn't let it go either. If unconscious bias arises, they should say, we don't do that here. It's not part of our culture. And that is, it's a kind of lays down the law in your company. And sometimes there are practices and attitudes that are thought of as harmless, but they're really not, which people have different working styles, and you might not, they might be different from yours, and you might think they're less committed to the workplace than you are. Another way to avoid unconscious bias is to ensure that any panels or committees or groups have a range of diversity on them. And the other interesting point was that men tend to be judged by potential and women by evidence. And the way that comes into play is that men will apply for jobs when they have 60% of the qualifications, while women will only apply when they have 100% of the qualifications. So that's all I have on that, and I'm going to send this back to Matt.
Thanks, Kathy. This presentation, if you ever attend Staffing World, it's almost a must attend because of the entertainment value, which is literally in the title, about the most entertaining virtual employment law game show ever. It's hosted by Toby Millara from ASA on the legal side, and the whole legal team then explains examples of this quiz show where they had a number of different categories, right? There was a PPP category, legal potpourri, 2020 elections, and then obviously at the end they have these fantastic lip syncing videos. And three of the questions that kind of stood out to me was, one was about PPP. Staffing firms will be deemed to have made a good faith certification regarding their need for a loan if they borrowed less than this amount. The correct answer was $2 million. The second one of PAGA, BIPA, HIPAA, or PIPA, this is what you should not be concerned with. The correct answer is obviously Pippa, who is just the sister of Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge. And then lastly, the last one, which was really timely, was talking about disclosing the identity of an employee who tests positive for COVID-19 could violate this law. The correct answer was the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this is a really great presentation that helps get into law with ASA, and is very entertaining and a must attend if you are going to attend future Staffing Worlds. Now I'll pass it back over to Megezi.
Thank you, Matt. This presentation was specifically on what practical things that staffing agencies can do to grow their sales in a post-COVID-19 world. It was a really well put together presentation. It was very concise and very specific in terms of steps that can be taken. The three main points were the need to implement a structured multi-step sales process. It is taking longer to grab attention, keep that attention, and convert that attention into sales. So you need to have a multi-step process and be consistent with it. The other point was leverage technology. Technology is here to stay, especially in a more virtual world, and you need to embrace it, take advantage of it, and not wait to be forced to make the change. You need to start embracing it now. And the last was increase your digital presence. This can be in the form of producing content to establish yourself as a resource, as an expert. Put more investment in your website and making sure that it reinforces your sales messaging, reinforces why are you different. And also social media is a great way to build credibility and to network in this day and age. One point that he emphasized is that 70% of workers would prefer to telecommute after COVID-19. So you're going to have more clients and candidates who can only be, who will mostly be online, and you'll have to adapt and making sure that you are better positioned to take advantage of those potential opportunities. The next presentation is looking at the 5 trends that will outlast COVID-19 and how to accelerate your 2021 recovery. Now, there was a lot of information in this slide, in this presentation, excuse me, and so it's going to be covered over several slides. So I'll be going over them pretty high level just to make sure we can get the main point. So the first thing to do is to understand that flexibility wins the day. You need to be flexible in how you respond and interact with potential buyers, but also in regards to what you offer to the potential buyers and how you're willing to offer it. The second point in the next slide was the emphasis of how, with more people online and with more people being familiar with shopping online, that even how they purchase staffing, we need to be adapting to that model. So there needs to be a more seamless experience when it comes to purchasing staffing. There needs to be the ability to do a lot of the sales process on mobile devices. And also, when it comes to support, think of when you're dealing with Amazon and you have an issue with any of their services or the product you purchase. They have very excellent support, very responsive, very quick, and you need to make sure that your support is at that level. Everyone is doing more online, and expectations are getting more and more along those lines as well, the Amazon experience. The third point was, in the next slide, was that the buying experience is getting just that much more complex. The number of people involved in the buying decision has increased from an average of 6 to 10 people in 2020. The more you increase the number of people involved in a buying decision, the chance of a deal dropping is 31% more each time another decision maker is involved in the process. Your buyers are also using more resources to research their decision prior to connecting with you and even during the sales cycle. And they're also taking online reviews more and more in their decision-making process. Online reviews are becoming more significant, and especially when it comes to the younger generation, those kinds of elements such as your online branding, your online reputation is playing a bigger role in the decision-making process. The fourth point was service proof required, and this again just emphasized the importance of managing and be proactive with your online reputation. It is becoming a much larger, having a much larger significance in the decision-making process. And at the same time, it also is a way to differentiate yourself from your competition. So you need to be paying more attention to that. And the fifth point, the last slide, was the importance of diversity and inclusion. Clients are prioritizing this. Millennials and Gen Z believe this is of more significance and factoring it as a larger reason for, or a larger part of their decision-making practice. So this is something that needs to be kept in mind. And so with that, I will turn it over to Matt to talk about tapping untapped talent pools.
Thank you, Megezi. This is the last breakout session we'll cover before wrapping up with our lessons learned. And this presentation, talked about, hiring, recruiting, hiring, and placing candidates with disabilities. And similar to, the diversity inclusion talk, there can be a level of being uncomfortable here. And one of the best ways to overcome that uncomfortable level is through personal experience, to find the right organization to work with to help you feel more comfortable. A company like GSG Talent Solutions, which was one of the members of the panel, and they can help with that relationship. But on the flip side, you have to remember that not everyone with a disability will use a disability organization to find a job. It's really important. So you have to think about the messaging of your website, of your job description, right? Are you saying somebody needs to talk in this job, or they need to communicate with them? Do they need to drive somewhere, or do they need to travel to get to their work? So really taking a step back to make sure everyone is comfortable with the accommodations, with candidates or with people really working in your company. And a great takeaway story that I heard was about the strength-based approach with a worker named Donnie, who they really wanted to focus on his strengths of loving NASCAR, and he built model cars. They placed Donnie in a job at a car detail facility, and he just flourished and thrived. So working with the right organizations to recruit, place, and hire those candidates with disabilities can really lead to tapping untapped talent pools. So now we'll shift over here to Megezi to kick off and wrap up our lessons learned here with the presentation.
So you may realize that I am not Paula, but Paula wasn't unfortunately able to make it on the presentation, so I'll be covering this for her. So with Paula, she had two big takeaways. The first was adaptation, and essentially she was very encouraged by her experience at Staffing World in its virtual form, and the number of attendants really demonstrated the resilience of our industry to adapt and pivot in the face of challenges. Her second point was an observation she made. There was a lot of conversation around candidates ghosting you on the first interview, and the absolute worst situation is ghosting on their first day of assignment. And what she picked up from one of the speakers, Tom Erb, in regards to this issue is that it unfortunately is a trend that is growing in the industry, and it's here to stay. And some of the ways that he recommended overcoming or dealing with this trend is to expand your recruiting avenues, get there first, make it easier for the candidates to work with you. For example, simplify your application process, prioritize your most sellable jobs, and at the end, be more human, be more likable. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rob to speak to some lessons learned from Ryan.
Thank you, Megezi. So obviously I'm not Ryan, but Ryan, he had one lesson that he got from Tom Erb is that selling has radically changed, right? He said that Tom Erb pointed out that door-to-door selling, which was already declining, is now virtually dead. That in-person networking is gone, with conferences and shows going virtual for the most part here in 2020. God willing, we could be back at it in 2021. 70% of workers would prefer to telecommute after COVID. And in response to that, we need to leverage technology, automation, and just a digital presence overall. And then lesson two is that adaptation. So many of us had to pivot on our positioning, and the best way to pivot, even in our daily perspective, is to ask, how can I help? Again, back to that, just being human in your conversation and just everything about you. So that's what Ryan had his takeaways from Staffing World. Next, I'm going to hand it back over to Matt for his takeaways.
Thanks, Rob. Surprisingly, one of my takeaways is about technology, but what I really wanted to share was it has to be added correctly, right? Does it help your company solve problems, accomplish your business goals, and will your team find value? And also your candidates and audience as well, because the quote that still sticks with me is you want to be 1 year ahead of your competition, but only 1 year ahead of your audience, and to make sure that tech helps everyone appropriately. Lastly, I thought diversity inclusion was such a huge theme of this conference as well. And it needs to be a priority throughout the entire organization, because when we're comfortable, we go back to what we know. and it's easy to take a step back and not push ourselves to that uncomfortable level. So if it's a priority throughout your entire organization and you keep it part of your mission and your values, people will start to get more comfortable with it. And there's so much data available that shows diverse organizations succeed more in the long run. We'll pass it back over to Rob for his takeaways from the conference.
Thanks, Matt. So I only had a booth only pass, so my perspective on the event was really around just the event itself. And I thought overall that the attendance was great, that people are open to virtual experiences. I think David yesterday said a funny thing that kind of resonated well with me, but we as individuals are now just getting very used to being on camera, where in the past, we would sit in front of our computer screens and would hate to see that little light on with our camera on. But being in that virtual setting over those couple of days with a little tube TV on my head was kind of just a cool and unique experience. The other thing I thought that was great on ASA's part was that they were very responsive to live feedback. There were some technical glitches that we had on day one, and I think as each day went on, it got easier to use, and they made adjustments on the fly to make it more user-friendly, and I very much appreciated that. And then lastly, although I still very much prefer being in person and just kind of, I think people in general are more social beings and like to be in face-to-face situations, we still need to embrace the virtual experiences and make them as best we possibly can. So those are my takeaways. And then I'm going to now hand it over to David to wrap things up here.
All right, thanks everybody for sticking with us, and thanks to everyone at Team Haley for the recap. This is a lot of content. I know it was hard to pick out what are the 2 or 3 bullet points we're going to present, and then to get through it in just over an hour was even tougher. My 3 bullets for everybody, and you may have noticed that I didn't present information on any sessions, and that's why I have the first point here. There was fantastic content, but if you're going to get value out of virtual events, treat them like real ones. Block time in your calendar, plan your schedule, and focus while you're there. Guilty as charged. My mea culpa here is I missed a lot of good stuff at Staffing World because I scheduled meetings when I shouldn't have, and I didn't treat it like an in-person event, and I lost a lot of the value. So as you're seeing webinars, as you're attending events like Lunch with Haley, make sure you're focusing, because if you can take home 1 point out of the hour, it's much more worthwhile than when you're half listening. Second thing is creating virtual engagement takes more effort. This is a sales and recruiting lesson for everybody. We as viewers are not the only one who's distracted. The people we're talking to are being distracted. Their Slack messages are going off. Their emails coming in. Even while we were doing this presentation, I had 3 phone calls come in that I had to ignore. So if I'm not talking face-to-face with someone, my presentation strategies have to be different. How you use video, the way you present, the way you speak, what you use when you decide to screen share. You have to do different things to keep the presentations engaging and hold people's attention. And lastly, boy, next year can't get here soon enough, not just so we get rid of this dang virus, but we got to get back to face-to-face events. I think that's going to be great for the staffing industry as we get back to face-to-face, but as we also learn to blend, as you heard today, technology, virtual experiences with real experiences, I think that's going to be the best for our employees, the best for our companies, the best for our clients, the best for our long-term happiness. With that said, I want to thank everybody for being part of today's webinar. We're already over on time, but we'll leave the webinar up a little bit if there are any questions. If you have a thought, an idea, something you want to know more about, give us a ring, 888-696-2900, or shoot us an email at info@haleymarketing.com. Also, as we've mentioned on a couple past webinars, if you're looking for more ideas on sales, on strategies for dealing with downturns, they're saying we're headed to lockdown again. That's going to mean a big challenge for a lot of our businesses. Go check out haleymarketing.com/COVID-recovery. Download the content there. It will give you tons of ideas on how to help your business thrive with whatever the rest of 2020 and 2021 throws at us. And lastly, we have one more upcoming presentation this month. We'll be doing a product demo on November 24th, just prior to Thanksgiving, where we'll be showing off Haley Mail and the new ways our clients are using this content marketing platform to drive sales, nurture relationships, and improve recruiting. From all of us at Haley Marketing Group, thank you so much for being part of today's Lunch with Haley event.